They say blood is thicker than water. But on a cold Tuesday night in October in a town so small it barely existed on any map worth reading, a 17-year-old boy proved that courage is thicker than both. He lay on the floor of a roadside diner, his life draining out of him in a dark river across the black and white tile, because he stepped between a girl he had never met and a man who had come to take her away. He did not know her name. He did not know her story. He did not know that the phone call she made with trembling, blood-slicked hands was not to the police. It was to her father. And by the time the sun crested the Bitterroot Range and spilled its pale light across the valley, the quiet town of Harlan's Crossing, Montana had stopped being quiet forever. Because the horizon was not glowing with sunrise. It was glowing with chrome. But before the thunder, before the army of leather and steel descended on a town that had never seen anything louder than a 4th of July parade, there was a alarm. And she was running. Not from danger, not yet. She was running from herself. Sloan Mercer was 16 years old, and she had been on the road for 3 weeks. 3 weeks since she had walked out of a life that most people would have killed for, and most people would never have understood. Her father was Cole Mercer. In certain circles, he was known by another name, Ironwall. He was the president of the Iron Saints Motorcycle Club, a man who commanded the loyalty of hundreds of men across 11 states, a man whose word carried the weight of law in places where law meant very little. He had given Sloan everything a girl could want. Private school, a car at 15, a bedroom the size of most people's apartments, men who would step in front of a bullet without being asked. Everything that is except a choice. Sloan did not want the leather. She did not want the clubhouse with its permanent smell of engine oil and cigarette smoke, and the kind of silence that fell over a room whenever she walked in, the silence of men who knew she was the president's daughter and adjusted themselves accordingly. She did not want the armed escorts to school. She did not want the way grown men twice her size averted their eyes when she passed like she was something sacred and untouchable. She did not want to be a princess in a kingdom built on gasoline and silence and a code she had never agreed to follow. And she did not want to be a bargaining chip. That was the word that kept coming back to her those last weeks in Reno. Chip. She had heard it used in context she was not supposed to hear, the late-night conversations in her father's office that she had learned to listen to from the hallway, her back against the wall, her breathing controlled and quiet the way she had taught herself since she was 8 years old. She had heard her name mentioned alongside the name of a man she had met exactly once, the son of the Nevada chapter president, a strategic alliance. Not forced. Cole Mercer was not entirely that kind of man, but planned, discussed, decided without her. She was gone before the sun came up the next morning. $400 in cash from the emergency roll she kept in her boot. Her bag packed in under 6 minutes, jeans, 2 sweaters, her worn copy of a novel she had read 4 times, a photograph of her mother she kept folded inside the back cover. She walked out the side door of the Reno compound at 4 in the morning while the night watch was changing shifts. She had studied the shift rotation for 3 weeks. What she did not account for was Derek Sallow, though she would not know his name in this context for 3 more weeks. She did not know that 6 months before she left, she had mentioned to another club member in a conversation she had considered private that if she ever wanted to disappear, she would go north through Las Vegas because no terminal in the country made her feel more anonymous. She did not know Sallow had been in the hallway. She did not know he had filed it away. She caught a Greyhound south at 4:45. She ditched her phone in a trash can outside the bus terminal. She cut her hair short in a gas station bathroom in Henderson, not because she thought it would fool anyone for long, but because it felt like shedding a skin she had worn too long. She paid cash for everything. She kept her head down. She did not use her real name. For 3 weeks, she was nobody. She was good at it. She had grown up in a world where survival was a skill taught young and learned hard. She knew how to read a room in 2 seconds. She knew how to spot the man in a crowd who was watching the exits instead of the show. She knew the difference between someone who was dangerous and someone who was only pretending to be. 3 weeks of cheap motels and cold bus stations and meals from vending machines had turned her $400 into 23. Her clothes smelled like diesel and stale coffee. She had blisters on both feet from boots made for looking good, not for walking highway shoulders. And then at a Greyhound terminal in Las Vegas, she made the mistake that changed everything. She grabbed the wrong bag. It was a simple error, the kind that happens 100 times a day in bus terminals across the country. Two black nylon duffels identical in every way, same dimensions, same brand, no name tags. Hers had been tucked under the seat in front of her. So had his. When the bus lurched to a stop and the overhead lights came on, and 40 people stood and shuffled toward the exit, all at once she reached under the seat, grabbed the strap, and walked off the bus without a second thought. She did not discover the mistake until 2 hours later. She was in the back of a pickup truck heading north on I-15, hitched from a retired school teacher heading to Missoula. She unzipped the bag for her water bottle and found what was inside. It was not her clothes. It was not her water bottle or her novel or her mother's photograph. Inside the bag, wrapped tight in rubber bands and stacked in neat bricks, was more money than Sloane had ever seen outside her father's safe. She did not count it. She did not need to. She had grown up in a world where she knew what that kind of money looked like, the specific way it was packed, the rubber bands at specific intervals, the way the bricks were turned so all the bills faced the same direction. That was not vacation money. That was not savings. That was operational cash. And beneath the cash, tied to the lining of the bag with a precision that spoke of someone who had done this before, was a small black flash drive in a hard plastic case. Sloane stared at it for a long time. The pickup truck hummed north through the Nevada desert, and the stars were very bright and very far away, and her hands had stopped shaking because she had trained them to. She did not plug in the flash drive. She did not count the money. She zipped the bag shut. The person who had been carrying this bag would find the Greyhound manifest. They would trace the route. They would find the pickup driver, and the pickup driver would remember her, the short, dark hair. The eyes that looked like a storm was happening behind them. The way she moved, like she was always calculating the distance to the nearest exit. She could not drop the bag. Not until she understood what she was carrying and figured out how to give it back without ending up in a shallow grave somewhere in the high desert. She needed to keep moving north. The school teacher was heading to Missoula, and Missoula was far enough from Reno that it felt like breathing room. She would figure out the rest from there. She bought a used sedan for $1,200 in cash from a private seller in Salt Lake City, a 1999 Ford, with a cracked dashboard and an AC that worked intermittently, and a radio that picked up 3 stations clearly, and a 4th that was mostly static, and a country station out of Pocatello. She drove north through Idaho and into Montana with the bag on the passenger seat and the flash drive taped back to the lining where she had found it. The tire blew on the edge of Harlan's Crossing. She limped into the only parking lot with lights still on. Harlan's Crossing was the kind of town that existed in the margins of the map. It sat in a narrow valley between the high shoulders of the Bitterroot Range, surrounded by dense stands of lodgepole pine and Douglas fir that pressed in from all sides like dark green walls that had decided to stay. The main street was 4 blocks long. There was a hardware store and a post office, a Lutheran church whose white steeple was visible from every point in town, and a bar called the Sawmill Tavern that closed at 10 on weeknights. The population sign at the edge of town read 2,200, but that felt generous. Half the houses on the back roads had been empty since the timber mill closed in 1997. The most exciting thing to happen in Harlan's Crossing in recent memory was a black bear getting into the school cafeteria 2 winters ago. The town still talked about it the way other towns talked about championship games. The neon sign above the diner buzzed in the cold. Holt's Diner opened 24 hours. The H in hours had burned out, giving the sign a lopsided, tired look that matched the building perfectly. The windows glowed warm yellow against the black Montana night. Through the smeared glass, she could see the interior, the checkered floor, the red vinyl booths, the long formica counter. A figure moved behind the counter. One customer sat in a booth near the window, an old man with white hair working on a piece of pie. She sat in her car for a long moment, hands on the steering wheel, engine ticking as it cooled. She looked at the bag on the passenger seat. She looked at the flat tire. She looked at the $23 in her wallet. Then she pulled her hood up, grabbed the bag, and walked into the diner. The bell above the door chimed with a tired little sound, like something that had been chiming for years and had long since given up expecting anything interesting. The smell hit her first. Burnt coffee, industrial cleaner, and the deep permanent ghost of bacon grease that had soaked into the walls over decades of short-order breakfasts. The floor was checkered, black and white, scuffed and stained. The booths were red vinyl, cracked with age and patched in 2 places with electrical tape. A jukebox sat in the far corner, unplugged and dusty, its chrome faded to a dull silver. Behind the counter stood a boy. He was about her age, maybe a year older, tall and lean in the way of someone who had grown fast and had not yet fully settled into his own frame. His hair was brown and shaggy, falling over his eyes. He wore a white apron over a flannel shirt, and he was wiping down the counter with a rag that needed its own cleaning. His name tag, slightly crooked, said Jesse. He did not look up when the bell chimed. He was used to the sound. The occasional long-haul trucker, the insomniac, the rare lost traveler who drifted off the highway looking for coffee and found this place instead. They came, they ordered, they left. Nobody stayed in Harlan's Crossing on purpose. The old man in the window booth, white-haired, weathered, nursing a slice of cherry pie with the methodical patience of a man with nowhere better to be, turned a page of his newspaper without looking up. His name was Earl Bowen. He came in every Tuesday night, a ritual maintained for 11 years since his wife passed. He was 74, retired from 30 years as a court clerk for Harlan County, and he noticed everything with the quiet, comprehensive attention of a man who had spent his career watching people tell the truth and lie and be unable to tell the difference between the two. He noticed the girl in the back booth. He noticed the way she had scanned the room. He noticed the bag. He went back to his pie and said nothing. Sloan scanned the room in 2 seconds corners. Exits the hallway leading to the restrooms, the position of the old man, the height and weight of the boy behind the counter. She chose the booth at the far back, positioning herself with a clear sight line to both the front door and the hallway. She set the bag on the bench beside her, one hand resting on it. She did not take off her jacket. Jesse Holt walked over with a laminated menu and a glass of water. He set both on the table. The menu was sticky at the edges. "What can I get you?" "Black coffee," Sloan said. Her voice was steady, quiet, controlled, in the way of someone who had learned to hold things tight. "And fries if you have them." "We always have fries." He paused. He was not looking at her the way men in her father's world looked at her, assessing, adjusting, calculating. He was looking at her the way someone looks when they recognize something without being able to name it. "Rough night," he said. It was the most he had said to a customer in weeks. He was not entirely sure why he said it. Maybe because she looked the way he felt most mornings when he unlocked the diner at 5, tired, in a way that went deeper than sleep and a long way from anywhere that felt like home. Sloan looked up at him. Something moved behind those watchful eyes, the surprise of someone who has been invisible for too long and is suddenly, unexpectedly seen. "Just passing through," she said. She was not just passing through. Jesse could see the blown tire from the window, the sedan sitting at a bad angle in the lot. But he did not push it. He went back behind the counter, poured her coffee, dropped a basket of fries in the oil. Jesse brought Sloan her coffee and fries. She wrapped both hands around the mug, the way a person does when they are trying to pull warmth into a body that has been cold for a long time. She ate slowly, methodically, the way someone eats when they are not sure when the next meal is coming. "Your tire's flat," Jesse said, setting down the fry basket. "I know. I've got a jack in the back. I can take a look when my shift ends if you want." She looked up at him, really looked. He was lean, a little awkward, in the specific way of someone who had not been told enough times that they were worth looking at. His eyes were a quiet brown kind, in a way that seemed structural, not performed, not calculated, just the way the beams of a house run true whether anyone is looking or not. He was offering to help a stranger at midnight in the cold because it did not occur to him not to. "You don't have to do that," she said. "I know," Jesse said. He almost smiled. He went back behind the counter. Sloan ate her fries and sipped her coffee, and for the first time in 3 weeks, the tight coil of tension in her chest loosened slightly, like a knot that had been wet for so long it had begun very slightly to give. That feeling lasted exactly 4 minutes. The bell above the door chimed again, and the air in the diner changed. Not a sound, a shift. The way the barometric pressure drops before a serious storm. A change in weight and temperature and possibility. She felt it before she saw it. Her hand moved to the bag before her eyes reached the door. 4 men walked in. They were not truckers. They were not locals. They were in their mid-20s, wearing expensive streetwear that had no business in a diner that smelled like decades of bacon grease. Clothing that announced money in the way of men who want you to know they have it and to think carefully about what that means. Two of them were heavy, broad, and thick across the shoulders, with the flat, patient eyes of men who had done ugly things and found them easy. The third was wiry and twitchy, his gaze jumping around the room the way a cornered animal checks for exits. The fourth man made Sloane's blood drop 10 degrees. He was lean with sharp cheekbones and a tattoo of a scorpion climbing the side of his neck, the tail curling up behind his ear. He moved with a loose, deliberate ease. Hands in his pockets, weight forward on the balls of his feet, the practiced stillness of a man who had learned long ago that the most dangerous thing in a room is the thing that does not move. His name was Doyle. She knew him not personally, but with the bone-deep recognition of someone who had grown up in rooms full of men who inhabited the same frequency. She had seen him once at a distance at a meeting in Reno she was not supposed to know about. He worked for Nolan Voss. He handled problems that required a certain kind of handling. He spotted her immediately. He did not shout. He did not rush. He walked toward her booth with the unhurried confidence of a man who had already decided how this was going to end and saw no reason to be theatrical about it. "There she is," Doyle said. His voice was quiet, almost conversational. That was worse than shouting. Shouting meant emotion. Emotion meant limits. Quiet like this meant none. The girl with the bag. Sloane did not move. She set her coffee mug down with a steady hand. She gripped the edge of the table and focused on the physical sensation of the formica pressing into her palm. That was how you kept your voice level and your face still when every nerve in your body was screaming. "Walk away, Doyle," she said. "I grabbed the wrong bag. I will give it back. But I am not getting in a car with you." That's not really the offer on the table. He stopped at the end of her booth. The other three spread out behind him, two blocking the front door, one drifting toward the back hallway. "Mr. Voss wants the bag, and he wants you. Tonight." "There's an old man right there," Sloane said, her voice deliberately louder, making sure Earl in the corner could hear every word. "And a phone. And the county sheriff's office is 6 minutes up the highway. You want to add kidnapping to whatever else you've got in outstanding." Earl Bowen had gone very still. One gnarled hand was moving toward the inside pocket of his coat. Doyle looked at her for a moment. He had expected fear. He had been given defiance, and he was adjusting. "Last chance," he said. "Stand up, bring the bag, walk out the door." "No," Sloane said. The word dropped into the silence of the diner like a stone into still water. Doyle reached across the table and grabbed her wrist. His grip was of vice fingers digging in, pulling her forward to the coffee mug, tipping and shattering on the floor. "I wasn't asking," he said. Behind the counter, Jesse Holt had watched the entire scene unfold with a cold dread that had started in his stomach and risen steadily into his throat. He knew he should stay back. He knew these men were a different order of dangerous than anything Harlan's Crossing had ever produced. The smart move, the safe move, was to ease back into the office, call 911, and wait. His hand was actually on the office door. Then he saw Doyle grab her wrist. He saw the pain flash across her face, quickly suppressed, quickly buried, because she was too controlled or too proud to give Doyle the satisfaction of seeing it land. And he saw her eyes, not just fear, the cold, clear look of someone who has calculated the odds and knows with absolute certainty that if she walks out that door, she is not coming back. Jesse Holt did not think. He did not calculate. He put both hands on the counter and vaulted over it. His sneaker caught the edge of the reach-in cooler and sent a rack of condiment bottles clattering to the floor. But he stuck the landing. He crossed the diner in 4 steps and put himself between Sloane and Doyle. His chest was heaving. His hands were shaking. He was holding a dish rag in his right fist like it was the only weapon he had, because it was. "Let her go," Jesse said. His voice cracked on the second word. He was terrified. Every nerve in his body was screaming at him to back up, to step aside, to be reasonable. His feet did not move. Doyle released Sloane's wrist and turned his full attention to Jesse. He looked at him the way a man looks at something slightly unexpectedly interesting before he decides what to do with it. "Go pour some coffee, kid. This is grown-up business." "Let her go," Jesse said again, louder. From the corner booth, Earl Bowen's voice cut across the diner, thin and trembling, but absolutely clear. "I'm calling the police. Right now." Doyle moved. He was faster than Jesse expected, faster than a man that size had any right to be. He pulled a collapsible baton from inside his jacket and flicked it open with a sharp metallic snap that rang through the diner like a starter's pistol. He swung it at Jesse. The baton caught him across the left forearm, with a crack that echoed off the tile walls. The pain was immediate and enormous, white-hot, traveling up his arm and into his shoulder like an electrical current. Jesse gasped, staggered, but did not go down. Something surged through him. Not bravery, not exactly. More like the thing that lives beneath bravery, the thing that activates when all other options have been taken away. He shoved Doyle backward with both hands hard. Doyle stumbled, genuinely surprised by the force. "Get him," Doyle said. "Run," Jesse yelled at Sloan. "The back go out the back." Sloan scrambled out of the booth, grabbing the bag. But the wiry one was already in the hallway, cutting off the exit, and one of the heavy ones was coming at her from the side. Jesse threw himself at the nearest man, the one moving towards Sloan. They crashed into a booth table, sending the napkin holder, salt shaker, and ketchup bottle flying across the floor. They went down together in a tangle of arms and furniture. Jesse fought with everything he had. It had no technique behind it. It was pure animal desperation, the kind that does not count odds, but simply refuses to stop. He caught the man with a right hook that surprised them both, solid enough to snap the man's head back and buy him a half second. But there were four of them, and they were professionals. Sloan had not run. She could have. The wiry one had left the hallway to help pin Jesse, and for 3 seconds the back exit was clear. She had spent 3 weeks learning how to disappear. She watched Jesse, this boy she had known for 15 minutes, fighting 3 men twice his size wild, and losing ground, a punch to the ribs that bent him double, a knee that caught his thigh. He kept fighting. She grabbed the nearest heavy object, an old-fashioned glass ketchup bottle, the thick-waisted kind that weighed close to 2 pounds. She gripped it by the neck, stepped in, and swung it with both hands at the back of the nearest man's skull. It did not break like in the movies. It connected with a dense, wet thud that she felt all the way up her forearms. The man dropped instantly, folding at the knees and hitting the floor like something had cut his strings. The distraction cost Jesse a fraction of a second. He turned toward the sound. That was when Doyle came from behind. The baton was gone. In his right hand, angled down and easy, was a knife. A 5-inch switchblade with a matte black handle. The overhead lights caught the blade in a thin white line. Sloan saw it first. Jesse. He turned, not fast enough. The blade went in below his left ribs, angled up. One motion, efficient and practiced. The sound it made was intimate and terrible. A sound Sloan would carry with her for the rest of her life, waking her from sleep years later in a cold sweat when the world had otherwise become quiet and safe. Jesse's eyes went wide. He looked down at the knife, at Doyle's hand, at the dark bloom spreading across his flannel shirt. His expression was not pain. It was pure, uncomprehending surprise, as if his body had simply not yet passed the information along. Doyle withdrew the blade. The blood came immediately. Dark, fast, impossibly warm. Jesse fell to his knees. Then he fell to his back. The checkered tile was cold beneath him hard and indifferent, and the fluorescent light above hummed its tuneless hum, and his blood spread outward across the floor in a slow, dark tide. In the distance, sirens, thin but coming. Earl had gotten through. "Ups," the wiry one hissed. "We've got to move." Doyle looked at Jesse on the floor. He looked at Sloan. He pointed the knife at her, a slow, deliberate gesture, like marking something on a list. "This isn't over," he said. "Tell your father we're coming for the bag." Then they ran. All four out the front door into the Montana night, the Escalade fishtailing out of the parking lot just as the first red and blue lights appeared on the highway. Sloan was on her knees beside Jesse before the sound of the engine had faded. The floor was a ruined glass and ketchup and the spreading dark pool of his blood already soaking through the knees of her jeans. His face was gray. His eyes were open but unfocused, aimed at the buzzing fluorescent light above him, with the blank, clouded gaze of someone receding from the room. Sloan did not panic. She had grown up in clubhouses where men came in bleeding from things worse than bar fights. She had watched her father's medic work on kitchen tables under bad light. She knew pressure. She knew the voice that kept someone present. She ripped off her jacket, balled it tight, and pressed it into his side with both hands, leaning her full weight in. "Jesse," her voice was flat, forceful. "Look at me. Do not close your eyes." His gaze drifted to her face. He coughed a thin, wet sound that she recognized and did not let herself name. "You're okay," Jesse whispered. His voice was barely there, dry and distant, like a radio losing its signal. "They didn't take you." "No," Sloan said. Her eyes were burning. She did not let them fall. They didn't. Because of you. You held the line. Jesse tried to smile. It was pale and lopsided, and it broke something in Sloane Mercer that she had not known she was capable of breaking. Good, he breathed. That's good. His eyes rolled back. His body went slack beneath her hands. No. She pressed harder. No, Jesse, stay with me. Earl Bowen was beside her, pressing a stack of paper napkins over her hands, his arthritic fingers steadying. Ambulance is coming, girl, he said. His voice was shaking, but his hands were not. 3 minutes. Hold on. Sloane did not take her hands off the wound. She talked to Jesse. She told him to hold on. She told him the ambulance was close. She told him she was not going to let him go. She meant it more than she had meant anything in 16 years. 3 minutes felt like a geographic distance. The paramedics came in fast, 2 of them clipped in urgent cutting away, Jesse's flannel shirt starting IV lines, with the precise efficiency of people who had learned that time was not a concept but a quantity. They moved with a speed that told Sloane everything she needed to know about how close this was. They loaded him onto the stretcher. They loaded the stretcher into the ambulance. And then they were gone, lights and sirens into the dark. Sloane stood in the middle of the ruined diner. She was covered in his blood. Her hands were red to the wrists. Her jacket was somewhere on the floor, soaked through and dark. She was shaking not from fear. The fear had burned away somewhere in the last 15 minutes, replaced by something cold and hard and very clear. A deputy tried to stop her, asked her to wait, said they needed a statement, said there was a patrol car that could take her. She looked at him with the eyes of someone who had just watched a boy she knew for 15 minutes bleed out on a floor for her, and something in that look made him step back. She walked past him into the rain. She walked 2 miles in the cold Montana dark, the bag over her shoulder, her boots finding every puddle on the highway's shoulder, the red and blue lights of patrol cars passing her in both directions. She did not feel the cold. She felt only one thing, a burning, crystalline certainty that settled into her bones like metal cooling into its final shape. This was her fault. This boy, this quiet, kind, impossibly brave boy she had known for 15 minutes, was on an operating table because she had walked through his door carrying a problem she had no right to bring to him. She could not undo the knife, but she could make sure it meant something. She could make sure the people who did this answered for it. And she could make sure that Jesse Holt did not bleed out in the dark of a Montana night without someone fighting for him the way he had fought for her. She dialed the number from memory, a number she had memorized years ago and sworn she would never use except at the end of the world. The world had ended. The line rang twice. Yeah, deep, no greeting. Just a single syllable like gravel rolling in a cement drum. Daddy. The silence on the other end was total and immediate. The silence of a man whose heart has stopped between beats. Sloane. His voice shifted, the warmth stripped away, replaced by something that was the auditory equivalent of a weapon being made ready. Where are you, Montana? A town called Harlan's Crossing. She swallowed. I'm okay. But Daddy, they found me. Doyle. He works for a man named Nolan Voss. I need you to know that name. I'm already moving. Wait. She stopped walking. The highway was empty in both directions, the pine trees' black walls on either side, the stars enormous overhead. Listen to me first. A pause. He was listening. There's a boy named Jesse Holt. He's 17. He works at a diner here. He stepped between me and Doyle tonight and took a knife for me. He is in surgery right now, and I don't know if he's going to make it. Silence. He doesn't know who I am, Sloane continued, and her voice cracked on the last word just barely, just once. He doesn't know who you are. He just saw a girl in trouble and stood up. He bled for me, Daddy. When Cole Mercer spoke again, his voice carried something beneath the granite, the voice of a man confronting something so far outside his control that all the power in the world offers no comfort. What's his name? Jesse Holt. Is he still breathing? Barely. They took him to the county hospital. You tell those doctors money is no object. You tell them Cole Mercer is paying every bill. A pause. And Sloane, tell the boy to hold on. We're coming. Daddy, she said the next words carefully because they were the most important words she had spoken in 3 weeks. You come for him, not for me. You come because a boy is dying for doing the right thing. And you come clean, no rivers, no ditches, no disappearances. You come right, or you don't come at all. The silence stretched long enough that she could hear beneath the wind and the distant sound of engines, the sound of a compound waking up. Voices, boots on gravel, the first low rumble of a motorcycle turning over. "We're coming," Cole Mercer said. The line went dead. Sloan lowered the phone. She looked up at the Montana sky, the stars hard and bright and indifferent, and she breathed in the cold air and let it fill her lungs completely. Then she turned and walked the rest of the way to the hospital. The county hospital was a two-story brick building on the north edge of town with a parking lot meant for 40 cars and an emergency room designed for the kinds of emergencies that happen in small Montana towns: broken bones, farm equipment, accidents, the occasional cardiac event. It was not designed for what had just come through its doors. Dr. Alan Reeves, the on-call trauma surgeon, had been pulled from his bed at home and arrived 9 minutes after Jesse still working the buttons on his scrub top. The knife had lacerated the liver, nicked the diaphragm, and clipped the spleen. Jesse was losing blood faster than they could replace it, and the monitors kept screaming their high, urgent screams, and the team moved with a focused, grim speed that told anyone watching everything they needed to know. Sloan sat in the waiting room. The fluorescent lights buzzed. The plastic chair was cold. She was still wearing Jesse's blood. A nurse had offered her a change of clothes. She had refused. She did not deserve clean clothes. Not while he was in there fighting. She was there when Ruth Holt arrived at 12:40, a small woman in a coat thrown over her nightgown, hair loose, face stripped of everything except the naked terror of a mother who had received the call. Ruth worked 2 days in the hospital laundry evenings, cleaning houses for the families on the east side of town who could afford to have someone else do it. She had been asleep when the call came. She arrived with her hair unbrushed and her rosary already in her hands. Ruth stopped when she saw Sloan. She looked at the blood. "Are you hurt?" Ruth asked. Even now, even in this, her first instinct was to ask someone else if they were hurt. "No, ma'am," Sloan said. "This isn't mine, it's Jesse's. He saved my life tonight." Ruth Holt sat down heavily in the nearest chair and pressed her rosary to her lips and began to pray. Sloan sat across from her and did not leave. You do not explain to a mother whose son is in surgery that an army is coming. You do not explain the flash drive or the money or the man with the scorpion tattoo. You sit with her. You hold the weight of the silence together. You let her pray and you watch the clock and you make a silent promise to the linoleum floor and the buzzing lights and whatever else might be listening. They sat through the darkest hours of the night, two strangers bound by a boy's courage in a pool of blood on a diner floor. Outside, beyond the mountains, beyond the dark ribbon of highway running south through the pines, something was building, a vibration, a pulse, like the earth itself remembering something it had briefly forgotten. Deputy Harris felt it first, the coffee in his cup holder trembling, his rearview mirror shaking the low-frequency tremor of heavy engines on distant asphalt. He sat up straight. He looked in his mirror. The hill 2 miles south was glowing, not with sunrise, with headlights, 200 of them, 3 abreast, running lights blazing, moving in perfect formation down Highway 93 like the advance of something that could not be argued with and would not be stopped. Harris reached for his radio. His hand was shaking. "Dispatch," he said. I need somebody to hear this." The lead bike crested the hill. A massive custom Harley blacked out with a rider who looked less like a man than like something the mountains had assembled and sent down the highway with a purpose. Cole Ironwall Mercer had arrived, and he had not come alone. The Iron Saints arrived at Harlan's Crossing County Hospital at 5:47 in the morning. The sound came first, a low vibration that began somewhere beneath the floor, traveling up through the plastic chair and into Sloan's spine. She had been sitting in the waiting room for 4 hours, still wearing Jesse's blood on her hands, and her jeans, her coffee, untouched and cold on the table beside her. Ruth Holt was asleep in the chair across from her, finally taken by exhaustion, her rosary still threaded through her fingers, her lips still moving faintly with prayers that had outlasted her waking hours. The vibration deepened. The framed photograph on the waiting room wall, a mountain landscape generic and cheerful, shifted slightly on its hook. Then the sound arrived. It rose from the earth like something geological, a rumble that grew into a roar that filled the valley and bounced off the Bitterroot peaks and came back doubled the way thunder does when it has nowhere left to go. The fluorescent lights buzzed in sympathy. The water in the paper cup on the end table beside Ruth trembled in small concentric circles. Sloane stood. She walked to the window. They came around the corner at the bottom of Elm Street in a wave. Row after row of motorcycles' headlights blazing in the early gray light chrome, catching what little dawn had crept over the eastern ridge. They filled the parking lot. They filled the street. They lined the sidewalks on both sides of the hospital entrance and arranged themselves in rows so precise they might have been measured with a carpenter's level. 200 machines, 200 men. Then one by one the engines cut out. The silence moved through the formation like a held breath, starting at the front and traveling back through the ranks until the last engine died and the valley returned to itself, changed quieter in a way that felt different from quiet. Cole Mercer dismounted the lead bike. He removed his helmet, hung it on the handlebar, and walked toward the hospital entrance without breaking stride, without looking at the security guard who had stumbled out the front door with his hand on his holster and the expression of a man deeply reconsidering his career choices. The automatic doors opened. Cole Mercer walked into the waiting room. He did not announce himself. He did not need to. A nurse froze mid-step. An orderly set down his clipboard. The fluorescent hum seemed to quiet. His eyes found Sloane. She was standing at the window, arms crossed, still wearing his daughter's blood. She had not slept. She had not changed. She had not left this room since she walked through its doors 4 hours ago. And the particular quality of her stillness, not resignation, not defeat, but the stillness of a soldier holding a position, made Cole Mercer's chest close around something he did not have a word for. He crossed the room in 3 strides. She did not run to him. She had promised herself she would not collapse into his arms like the little girl she had been the last time the world had fallen apart on her. She was not that girl anymore. She had spent 3 weeks proving it. But Cole did not wait for her to decide. He wrapped his arms around her and she let him just for a moment, one moment, where she was not a strategist or a survivor, or the girl who had held Jesse Holt's life in her hands with her jacket balled against his side. Just a daughter, just his. She felt him exhale against the top of her head. A long, slow breath, the releasing of something he had been holding for 3 weeks. Then she stepped back. "I'm okay," she said, "but he's not." She told him the room number. She told him the surgeon's name. She told him 40%. Cole released her. He turned. His eyes found Ruth Holt, who had been jolted awake by the noise and was now standing pressed against the far wall, clutching her rosary with both hands, her face a mask of terror that had nothing to do with iron saints and everything to do with a woman who had spent 4 hours waiting to hear whether her son was going to live. Cole crossed the room to her. The leather of his cut creaked with each step. His boots were heavy on the linoleum. He was a terrifying figure by any objective measure, the size, the ink, the weathered, road-hardened face, the patches that announced to anyone who could read them that this man had lived outside the margins of ordinary life for 30 years. Ruth Holt was shaking hard enough that the rosary beads clicked softly in the silence. Cole stopped in front of her. He removed his sunglasses. His eyes were red-rimmed from wind and a long, hard night of riding with fear at his back. But they were present. They were human. He went down on one knee. The president of the Iron Saints knelt on the scuffed linoleum floor of a county hospital waiting room before a woman in a nightgown with a coat thrown over it, her hair still loose from sleep, her hands trembling. "Ma'am," Cole said. His voice was low and careful. "My name is Cole Mercer. Your son saved my daughter's life last night." Ruth stared at him. Her lips moved without sound. "There's no math that balances what he did," Cole continued. "No ledger that accounts for it. But I'm telling you this, your boy is under my protection now. He is under the protection of every man standing in that parking lot. The people who put that knife in him, we are going to find them." He stood. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. "And God help them," Cole said quietly, "because the law won't have the chance." Sloane, watching from across the room, felt something shift inside her chest. She had seen her father command rooms. She had seen him intimidate men twice her age without raising his voice. But she had never seen him kneel before anyone. She had set the terms. He had met them. So far. By 9 in the morning, the hospital had reached a state of suspended occupation. The Iron Saints had established themselves with the quiet, disciplined efficiency of men who had done this kind of thing before, not in hospitals, but in territory. Some slept in the waiting room stretched across the narrow plastic chairs with the practiced adaptability of people accustomed to sleeping wherever they stopped. Others patrolled the hallways in pairs, moving slowly, speaking in low voices, holding doors for nurses and nodding to orderlies who had adapted to their presence with the resigned pragmatism of people who had no available alternative. They were unfailingly polite. That was somehow the most unsettling part. Crane Cole's sergeant-at-arms, a lean, scarred man with a shaved head, and the economy of movement of someone who had learned long ago that stillness is its own kind of power, stood outside the ICU doors like a post sunk in concrete. Briggs, the vice president, 6'6" and built like a grain elevator, had taken up position at the elevator bank at the end of the hall. Dr. Alan Reeves emerged from the ICU at 11:45. He looked like a man who had been in a fistfight with probability and had emerged without a clean victory. His surgical cap was crooked. His eyes carried the weighted exhaustion of someone who had spent hours holding a young life together with skill and equipment and will. He stopped when he encountered the wall of leather-clad men. Cole raised a hand and they stepped back, clearing a path. "Mrs. Holt," Dr. Reeves said, finding Ruth. She stood. Her hands were clasped so tight the knuckles were white. "He made it through the night," Reeves said. The room exhaled. "His vitals have stabilized somewhat. The next 48 hours are still critical. We had to remove the spleen. The liver laceration was significant. If infection stays away and his body responds to the transfusions..." He paused. "He has a chance. A real one. But it's going to be a long road." Ruth pressed the rosary to her lips. Her eyes closed. Tears moved silently down her face. Cole stepped toward the doctor. "What does he need?" Reeves looked up at him. "Excuse me. Equipment, specialists, blood supply. Whatever he needs that you don't have here, name it. I can have a helicopter at your roof in 20 minutes. Dr. Reeves blinked. He was accustomed to working with what a small county hospital provided. He was not accustomed to being offered unlimited resources by a man who looked capable of bench pressing the ambulance bay. "We have what we need for now," Reeves said carefully. "But recovery will be long, months of rehabilitation, possible follow-up surgery." "He'll have whatever he needs," Cole said. It was not a request. It was a statement of fact delivered with the certainty of gravity. He turned to Crane. "Get the treasurer on the line. Set up a fund for the Holt family. Mortgage, utilities, medical, food, everything. Mrs. Holt doesn't see a single bill while her son is fighting." "Done," Crane said, phone already in hand. Sloan watched from across the room. She watched her father operate the authority, the efficiency, the way a room organized itself around him without being asked. He was good at this. He had always been good at this. But she was thinking about the bag at her feet, about what was on that drive, about the fact that none of them were actually safe yet. The double doors at the end of the hallway opened hard enough to announce intention. Sheriff Boyd Gantry came through them like a man who had been building up pressure since 5 in the morning and had finally decided to release the valve. He was broad-shouldered with a silver buzz cut and a jaw built from the same material as the Bitterroot Range. He had held office for 14 years. He had never been outmaneuvered on his own turf. 2 deputies flanked him. Behind them, Detective Walt Pruitt, thinning hair, nicotine-yellowed fingers, the carefully neutral face of a man who had learned to keep his reactions to himself. His eyes moved over the room with a precision that cataloged information the way a man catalogs information he intends to pass along. Sloan noticed. She filed it away. "All right," Gantry announced. "Mr. Mercer, we need to talk. Right now." Cole turned slowly. He looked at Gantry the way a river looks at a rock it intends to go around with patience without particular concern. "You cannot occupy a municipal building with a private army," Gantry said. His face was working toward red. "You're disrupting hospital operations. You're frightening my citizens. I want your men out of this parking lot by noon, and I want them out of this county by sundown." Cole took one step toward him. The physical difference was not enormous. The presence difference was absolute. "My men are parked on a public street and in a public parking lot," Cole said. His voice was conversational, almost gentle. "They are waiting for news on a boy who was nearly murdered in your county last night. They are not blocking roads. They are not threatening anyone. They are standing in a parking lot." A pause. "Is that a crime in Harlan's Crossing, Sheriff?" This is an active investigation, Gantry said, and you are interfering with interfering. Cole let the words sit for a moment. Sheriff, if we were interfering, you would know it. We have been cooperative. In fact, he nodded to Crane. Crane produced a folded piece of paper and held it out toward Gantry. Black 2019 Chevy Escalade stolen plates out of Billings, Crane said. Abandoned on Forest Road 7, approximately 4 miles northeast of town, near the river crossing. We've had eyes on it since 4 this morning. Haven't touched it. Waiting on your team. Gantry looked at the paper. He looked at Pruitt. Pruitt's expression had not changed, but something moved through his eyes, a calculation swiftly completed and swiftly buried. How did you find it that fast? Pruitt asked. His voice was flat and professional. We have more eyes than you do, Cole said simply, and we're motivated. Gantry's face had completed its journey to red. He was beaten, and he knew it, and the knowledge did not sit well on a man who had spent 14 years being the largest presence in every room he entered. He issued instructions to his deputies and turned back to Cole. If one person in this town is harassed, we're not here for the town, Cole said. We're here for the men who put a knife in a 17-year-old kid. When we find them, Sheriff, a pause that functioned as punctuation. You'll want to find them first. Gantry's boots were loud and angry on the linoleum as he left. Pruitt followed. His footsteps were not angry. They were careful and controlled and told nothing. Sloan had watched the entire exchange from the end of the hallway, her back against the wall near the vending machines. She had not spoken. She had not intervened. But she had watched Pruitt's eyes, and she had seen the calculation. She needed to see what was on that drive. She waited until Cole was deep in operational conversation with Crane and Briggs. She waited until Ruth had dozed off again in her chair. She picked up the boy and walked down to the first floor and found a nurse named Carol at the administrative station. Can I borrow a laptop for 30 minutes? It's important. Carol looked at her, at the dry blood still on her jeans, at the particular quality of composure in her face that was not calm, but was something that had been built in place of calm, and said nothing. She logged out of her workstation, stood up, and left the office without being asked to. Sloan closed the door. She sat down. She unzipped the dish and removed the flash drive from the lining, the small black rectangle unmarked, still in its hard plastic case. She held it in her palm for a moment. Then she plugged it into the USB port. The drive mounted, one folder, 3 files. She opened the spreadsheet first. It took her less than 40 seconds to understand what she was looking at. The spreadsheet was a ledger. Dates, names, payment amounts, account numbers. Payments made from a series of shell companies to individuals across 3 states. The amounts ranged from $3,000 a month to $200,000 for a single transaction. The names included a state senator, a Port Authority director, 2 federal judges, a DEA division supervisor. Sloan scrolled slowly. Her mouth was dry. She was holding 4 years of documented corruption. Every person on this list had taken money from Nolan Voss. Then she stopped scrolling. A name jumped off the screen. Pruitt Walter D. Harlan's, Crossing County Sheriff's Department, Montana. Monthly payment, $3,000. Consecutive months, 48. Last payment, October 1st, 6 days ago. The detective who was investigating Jesse's stabbing. The man who had watched her from across the waiting room this morning with those flat, cataloging eyes. The man who was right now presumably processing the abandoned Escalade on Forest Road 7. Walt Pruitt was on Nolan Voss's payroll, which meant that everything Pruitt learned went directly to Voss, which meant Voss already knew the Iron Saints were here, already knew Sloan was here, already knew the approximate status of the flash drive he had sent 4 men to retrieve. The investigation was compromised from the inside. Sloan kept scrolling. She found the second name 12 rows down. Sallow Derek J. Iron Saints, MC, Northern Nevada. Chapter Prospect. Quarterly payment, $10,000. Consecutive payments, 6. Total paid, $60,000. Handler contact D.W. Voss Organization. Sloan stared at the entry until the letter stopped meaning anything and started meaning everything again. Derek Sallow, 22 years old. Northern Nevada prospect assigned to the Reno compound 8 months ago. He had been at the compound the night she left. He had been one of the men assigned to watch the perimeter that night. He had known her habits. He had known she preferred Greyhound over flying because she did not like leaving paper trails. He had known she liked to route through Las Vegas. He had been in the hallway 6 months ago when she had mentioned it without thinking. He had sold her location to Voss's people within 3 days of her leaving Reno. That was how Doyle had found her. She opened the PDF. It was worse. Financial routing diagrams, shell company structures, offshore account numbers, wire transfer records totaling across 4 years somewhere north of $300 million. This was not just a bribe ledger. This was the complete digital architecture of Nolan Voss's money laundering operation. She did not open the video file. She did not need to. She sat in the quiet office with the fluorescent light humming above her and thought with the cold, complete focus of someone who understood exactly how much danger they were still in. If she went upstairs and handed her father the flash drive and told him everything, Cole Mercer would know what to do. He always knew what to do. He would handle Sallow quickly, decisively, permanently. And the moment he handled Sallow, the way the Iron Saints Code demanded, every piece of evidence on this drive would be poisoned. Every defense lawyer Voss could retain would argue fabrication, would argue that a motorcycle club with a grudge had manufactured a ledger to bring down a man who had embarrassed them. The entire case would unravel. She pulled the flash drive from the port. She slipped it into the pocket of her jeans, not the bag. The bag could be taken. The jeans stayed on her body. Then she went to find Derek Sallow. He was in the hospital cafeteria, sitting alone at a table near the window, a sandwich in front of him that he had not touched. He was 22, narrow-faced, with the slightly unfocused look of someone who had not slept and was not handling it well. He wore his prospect cut the vest without full patches, the mark of someone still earning his place. He looked up when Sloan approached. Something moved across his face. Guilt, maybe, or the anticipation of guilt. "Hey, Sloan," he said. He tried for casual. He missed by miles. "Glad you're safe. Your dad was—" "I need to ask you something," Sloan said. She sat down across from him. She did not set her bag down. She did not take off her jacket. She looked at him with eyes that had learned in 16 years of growing up in rooms full of men who had things to hide exactly how to find the thing being hidden. "When I left Reno, I was careful. I ditched my phone. I paid cash for everything. I changed my appearance. I didn't tell anyone where I was going." She paused. "But they found me anyway. 3 weeks later, in a town in Montana that isn't on any map worth reading." She paused. "That kind of tracking doesn't come from cameras or databases. It comes from someone who knew my patterns, someone who knew I used Greyhound, someone who knew I liked to route through Las Vegas." Another pause. "Someone close." The silence at the table had weight and texture. "I don't know what you're, Derek." Her voice did not rise. It went the other direction, quieter, more precise. "A boy is upstairs in a medically induced coma right now. He is 17 years old. He has a mother who works 2 jobs and prays on a rosary and was asleep in her nightgown when the hospital called. He stepped in front of Doyle with a dish rag in his hand because he couldn't stand by while someone was taken." She looked at him steadily. "If he dies, whoever gave Doyle my location is responsible for that. Not Doyle, not Voss. The person who made the call." Sallow's composure cracked. It was not dramatic. It was the specific, visible crumbling of a person who has been holding something together with nothing but the absence of confrontation, and the confrontation has finally arrived. His face went through 3 expressions: denial, terror, and then a shame so complete it seemed to hollow him from the inside. He put his face in his hands. "They said nobody would get hurt," Sallow said, his voice muffled and thin. "They said they just wanted the bag. They said they'd take it and let you walk. I didn't know about the knife. I didn't know there'd be—" "How much?" Sloan said. He looked up. 10,000 a quarter, she said. 18 months. "I know the numbers, Derek." He stared at her. His eyes were wet and wide with the terror of a man who is looking at a 16-year-old girl and realizing she holds every card in the deck. "Your father is going to kill me," he whispered. "Maybe," Sloan said. "If he finds out the wrong way. If this comes out as a club matter with no documentation, no process, yes. He'll handle it the way the code says to handle betrayal." She reached into her pocket and set her phone on the table between them. "But I'm giving you a choice. You're going to tell me everything, who you talked to, when, what you told them, how you communicated, every detail, and I'm going to record it. And then, and then I take the recording to Crane, not to my father. Crane handles it through the club's internal process. You surrender your cut, you get on a bus, you don't come back. Sallow stared at the phone. He stared at the window. He stared at the rows of motorcycles gleaming in the parking lot below 200 machines that represented everything he had wanted and sold and lost. You're smarter than him, he said quietly. He did not mean it as a compliment or an insult. It was just a fact he was arriving at too late. I'm his daughter, Sloane said. Start talking. Sallow talked for 24 minutes. He told her everything, how Voss's people had first approached him at a bar in Henderson, how it had started with small things, club travel schedules, meeting dates, things that felt harmless enough that he had been able to tell himself they were harmless, how it had escalated gradually the way all such things escalate, until he was providing location intelligence on Sloane within 72 hours of her departure. He told her the name of Voss's handler. He told her the method of contact. He told her the date and content of every communication he had had regarding Sloane's movements. Sloane recorded every word. When it was done, she picked up the phone and stood. Stay here, she said. Don't talk to anyone. Don't leave this table. If you run, my father will find you. And then there won't be a process. Sallow nodded. He sat at that table like a man waiting for his own sentencing. Sloane found Crane in the second-floor stairwell. She pulled him aside and played the recording without preface. Crane listened without expression. The scar along his jaw did not move. When the recording ended, he stood quietly for a moment. Your father should hear this, he said. Not yet, Sloane said. Cole will go nuclear. I need him focused on finding Doyle, not tearing the club apart over a prospect. Handle Sallow quietly. Take his cut. Put him on a bus east. He doesn't come back. Crane studied her for a long moment. He had served under Cole Mercer for 16 years. He had been in rooms with men who ran things that did not get discussed in polite company. He was looking at Sloane Mercer, 16 years old, dried blood on her jeans, a flash drive in her pocket, and a recording on her phone, and something behind his eyes shifted almost imperceptibly. The grudging acknowledgement of a man who has just been outmaneuvered by someone he had not expected to be capable of it. You're giving me an order, Crane said. I'm giving you a strong suggestion. The corner of his mouth moved, the closest thing to a smile she had ever seen on his face. I'll handle it, he said, but your father finds out eventually. He always does. By then the evidence will be clean and documented. He can be angry later. She met his eyes. Right now I need him clear. Crane nodded once and went. Sloane checked the time. 1:58 in the afternoon. Jessie had been in the coma for 15 hours. She went upstairs. The nurses led her into the ICU. She walked down the hall to room 214 and stood in the doorway. Jessie Holt looked impossibly young against the white sheets. The monitors traced their steady green lines. The IV lines ran from the stand to his arm. His face was pale, but his chest rose and fell steadily, regularly. Steadily was good. Steadily was alive. Sloane sat in the chair beside the bed. She did not speak for a while. She watched the cardiac monitor trace its line across the screen, each peak and valley a small, complete argument for the world continuing. She picked up his hand. It was cold. She held it. I know you can't hear me, she said. Her voice was quiet. But I need to tell you something. I found out what's on the drive. I know who sent Doyle. I know who's corrupt and who's compromised, and what needs to happen to make sure none of it touches you or your mother again. I'm going to fix it, Jessie, the right way, not my father's way. The way that holds up in a courtroom. She looked at his face. You changed something in me tonight. You acted without calculating the cost. You just stood up. She exhaled slowly. I'm going to try to be that kind of brave. On the bedside table, she noticed a book, a worn paperback manual on automotive mechanics, its spine cracked from years of use, its pages soft with handling. She picked it up, read the cover, set it back down carefully. Ruth had told her about the car, the Ford Taurus in the garage with the blown transmission that Jessie's father had left behind when he drove away and never came back. Jesse had been working on it since he was 9 years old. He ordered parts with his own money. He taught himself everything the manual could teach. He did not want the car. He wanted to prove that something broken could be made whole again. Sloane understood that with a clarity that felt personal. She was still sitting with Jesse when the footsteps came. She heard them from 20 feet away, the hard-soled click of dress shoes on hospital linoleum. Not the soft rubber soles of medical staff, not the heavy bootfall of iron saints. The deliberate cadence of men who had chosen their footwear for a different kind of room and had not bothered to change. Sloane stood. She moved to the doorway and looked down the hall. Two men in blue scrubs approached clipboards and hand ID badges clipped to their breast pockets. At a glance, they looked like every other hospital worker who had moved through these halls in the last 12 hours. Sloane did not look at a glance. She looked at their feet. Black leather dress shoes, polished to a mirror finish. The kind of shoes a man wears to a corporate board meeting, not to a 12-hour nursing shift on linoleum floors. And beneath the loose fabric of the scrub pants on the man to the right, the rectangular outline at the ankle that she had been trained from the time she was old enough to notice things to recognize. A holster. Sloane stepped back into the room. She pulled out her phone and typed to Crane's number, 2 men. Scrubs fake, hard-soled shoes armed. ICU hallway, coming toward 214. Now. She hit send. Then she looked at Ruth, who had come in an hour ago and was dozing in the corner chair. Mrs. Holt. Sloane touched the woman's shoulder, firm but gentle. I need you to come with me right now. Ruth blinked awake, reaching instinctively for her rosary. What's wrong? Please trust me. There's a restroom at the end of the hall, second door on the left. I need you to go there right now and lock the door and not come out until I come for you. The urgency in Sloane's voice cut through Ruth's drowsiness, directly to the part of a person that simply responds. Ruth stood and moved toward the door. Go now, Sloane said. Left, then the second door. Ruth went. Sloane turned back to face the hallway. She pulled up the camera on her phone and pressed record. Then she stepped into the doorway and stood with her shoulder against the frame. The 2 men were 10 feet away. Can I help you? Sloane said. They stopped. Up close, the disguise was worse than it had looked from a distance. The scrubs were unwashed, still creased from the packaging. The ID badges bore the emptiness of stock photos. And their eyes, flat empty, professionally careful, had nothing in common with the exhausted, compassionate faces of the nurses who had been working Jesse's ward for 4 days straight. We're here to check the patient's vitals, the one on the left said. Measured, rehearsed. His nurse was here 18 minutes ago, Sloane said. His vitals are stable and logged. And your names are on the rotation board. I checked. She had not checked the rotation board. They did not know that. The 2 men exchanged a look, the micro-communication of trained professionals whose cover story has just encountered an obstacle it was not designed for. Step aside, miss. The one on the right said it quietly, and his hand moved toward his waistband. I wouldn't do that, Sloane said. Her heart was slamming against her ribs with a force she could feel in her fingertips, but her voice was steady. Because in about 3 seconds, 2 very large and extremely unhappy men are going to come through that stairwell door behind you. The stairwell door came off its frame. Briggs hit it at full speed, 300 pounds, moving with the gathered momentum of a man who had been given a direction and a purpose and needed nothing else. Behind him, Crane came through with the contained violence of someone who had done this in tighter spaces than a hospital corridor. The 2 men reacted instantly, trained fast, pivoting to meet the new threat. The one on the right got his hand on the ankle holster. Briggs closed his hand around the man's wrist and applied the kind of rotational force that does not stop when it meets resistance. The man's scream was short cut off when his back met the hallway wall with enough force to crack the drywall. The second man tried to run. Crane caught him by the collar of his stolen scrubs and converted his forward momentum into a controlled backward arc that ended with the man face down on the linoleum with Crane's knee between his shoulder blades. The clipboard clattered to the floor. A compact pistol fitted with a suppressor slid out from under it and skittered across the tile. 8 seconds. No shots fired. No patients disturbed. Just the sound of 2 men being pressed against surfaces by 400 pounds of combined Iron Saints senior membership and the quiet click of zip ties being pulled tight. Sloane stopped recording. She reviewed the footage, both faces clearly visible, the ankle holster in frame, the suppressed pistol on the floor, the timestamp running in the corner. She saved the video. She duplicated it to a cloud account she had created that morning using the hospital's public Wi-Fi and a name that was not hers. She looked at the two men on the floor. "These two go to the FBI," she said. "Not Pruitt, not Gantry's office. Federal, when the time comes." Crane looked at the men's feet. He looked back at Sloan. He said nothing. But he stepped aside and let her lead the way down the hall, which from Crane was louder than any words. She found Cole in the parking lot 20 minutes later. He was standing beside his Road King, a phone to his ear, his face carrying the darkness of a man processing several pieces of intelligence simultaneously. When he saw Sloan approaching with the bag in her hand, and the look on her face that he had learned over 16 years meant she had something important and was going to deliver it in a specific sequence, he ended his call. "We found Doyle," Cole said before she could speak. One of the nomads spotted his driver buying gas at the Exxon on Route 12, followed him to the Blue Ridge Motor Court 4 miles east. Room 7. 3 men, sitting tight waiting for dark to move. "I know about Doyle," Sloan said, "but we have a bigger problem." She told him all of it. The flash drive, the ledger, the names, the senator, the DEA supervisor, the federal judges. She told him about Pruitt, the 48 monthly payments, the last one 6 days ago, what it meant for the investigation. She told him about Sallow, the $60,000, the 18 months, the conversation in the cafeteria at Crane's handling of the removal. She told him about the fake nurses now zip-tied in a storage room on the first floor and the suppressed pistol on the floor beside them. She told it the way a field commander delivers a situation report. Fact, sequence, implication. No softening, no apology, no emotional cushioning. Cole listened without speaking. His face moved through its transformation slowly, the tectonic shift from composed to something that lived beneath composition, something that had been pressurized over decades and was now being given a very specific reason to rise. When she got to Sallow's name, the vein at his left temple began its slow, visible pulse. When she described the fake nurses and the suppressed pistol 12 feet from Jesse's bed, his hands closed at his sides. When she finished, the silence between them had weight. "Sallow," Cole said. The name came out like a single piece of something hard hitting a harder floor. "Crane's handling it, by the book. He should be in the, and if he were Emin, every lawyer Voss can afford argues fabrication, argues that a motorcycle club with a reason for revenge manufactured a ledger. The case against Voss falls apart, and every documented co-conspirator walks because we couldn't keep our hands clean for 24 hours. Sloan looked at her father steadily. "Sallow walking away disgraced is what keeps the evidence clean." Cole stared at her. He was seeing something, the shift from reactive assessment to something slower and more deliberate, like a man who has been looking at a landscape for years and has suddenly realized it contains something he missed. "You handled all of this," he said, "without telling me. Because I knew what you'd do if I told you. Because you don't trust me. Because I know you," Sloan said. "There's a difference, Miss." The words settled between them. Cole was quiet for a long time. The parking lot hummed around them, the distant sound of a truck on the highway, the wind moving through the pines on the ridge above town. "What do you want to do next?" he asked. She had waited 16 years to hear him ask that question and not follow it with an answer of his own. "Doyle is the link between Voss and the knife in Jesse's side," Sloan said. "Right now, Voss doesn't know we have the drive. He thinks Doyle failed to recover it. He's operating blind and desperate, which is why he sent those two to the hospital. Panicking men make mistakes." She paused. "We use Doyle. We have him call Voss. We tell Voss that Doyle has the girl and the bag, but the roads are being watched, and he needs to come personally to confirm the transfer. We give him the old Harlan Mill off Forest Road 7. When he shows up, we hand him to the FBI with the flash drive taped to his chest." Cole was quiet. "He'll come," Sloan said. "The drive has enough to put him away for multiple consecutive lifetimes. He has to see it destroyed himself. He cannot trust anyone else to confirm it." Cole looked at the hospital building. He looked up at the second floor, the window of room 214, the faint blue glow of Jesse's cardiac monitor visible through the glass. He looked back at his daughter. "Beanbag rounds," Sloan said. "Non-lethal. Everyone goes to trial." The sound Cole made was the sound of a man who has spent 30 years living by one code, being asked to operate by a different one and finding against the grain of everything he has built himself into that he is capable of it. Non-lethal, he said. Fine. But if they shoot first? You defend, Sloan said. I know, but you defend, you don't finish. Cole held her gaze for a moment longer than necessary. Then he turned toward the assembled ranks of the Iron Saints and raised his voice. Crane, Briggs, on me. A pause, by mum. And somebody to go get Doyle. He had not commanded. He had listened to his daughter, and he had followed her plan. Sloan stood alone in the parking lot as the machine began to move around her. The autumn light was amber and low, the shadow of the Bitterroot Ridge falling long across the valley. In a few hours it would be dark. She looked up at room 214. Hold on, she said quietly enough that only the wind could carry it. I'm going to finish this. She turned and walked back into the hospital. She had a trap to build. The old Harlan Mill sat on a bluff above the Bitterroot River like a monument to everything the town had once believed about itself and had long since stopped believing. It had been built in 1948 when the timber industry was a religion in this part of Montana, and the men who worked the saws believed the forest would last forever. The main warehouse was cathedral-sized 2 stories of open floor beneath a lattice of steel catwalks and overhead beams, the kind of industrial space that had once been filled with the scream of bandsaws and the smell of fresh-cut pine and the voices of 200 men who thought they were building something permanent. The mill closed in 1997. What remained was a skeleton. Corrugated metal walls punched through in a dozen places by decades of winter storms. A roof that was more absence than presence opened to the sky in long ragged strips, the remaining panels groaning in the wind. The catwalks above the floor were intact in most places, a lattice of rusted steel grading 30 feet above the ground, accessible by a single iron ladder bolted to the east wall. The machinery was still there. Bandsaws the size of small cars, their blades long since seized with rust. Conveyor frames that had not moved in 27 years, draped in shadow, and the silence of things that had been waiting too long. The river below the bluff was running high. 4 days of rain had swelled it beyond its usual level, and in the dark it was audible from inside the building, a constant heavy sound, the sound of water with somewhere to be, and no patience for anything that got in its way. The drop from the bluff edge to the water was 80 feet, maybe more. Sloan arrived at 9:30, 3 hours before the meeting. The dry cleaning van moved down Forest Road 7 without headlights, navigating by the pale light of a 3/4 moon that came and went between the clouds. The road was a river of black mud. The van moved through it slowly, finding purchase and losing it, and finding it again like a careful thought, or working its way through difficult terrain. Sloan sat in the back with Crane and 2 nomads named Cutler and Reyes. Nobody spoke. She had spent the hours between the parking lot and departure doing what she always did when the stakes were high enough to feel physical. She had planned with the obsessive, iterative focus of someone who understood that the difference between a good outcome and a catastrophic one was usually not courage or strength, but preparation. She had drawn the mill layout 4 times on the backs of cafeteria napkins, refining it with each iteration. She knew where the load-bearing pillars were. She knew the angles from the catwalks to the warehouse floor. She knew the positions of the machinery, which pieces were large enough to provide cover, which ones Voss's team would instinctively use, and which ones she needed the nomads to be behind first. She knew where the shadows would fall and where the light would go when she threw the switch. The nomads were not the patch members who staffed the hospital parking lot. The Iron Saints Nomad chapter was the organization's traveling force men with no fixed address who moved between chapters, handling work that required a particular combination of skill, discretion, and the calm that only comes from having been in rooms where things had gone wrong before and surviving them. Several had served in the military. 2 had done combat tours overseas. Reyes, a lean, quiet man who had barely spoken in 4 hours, had spent 8 years as a Marine Corps sniper before a roadside incident in Helmand Province had ended his service and redirected him toward a different kind of brotherhood. They rigged the floodlights in the rafters, angling them downward toward the center of the warehouse floor. 6 high-intensity construction lamps, 14,000 lumens each. The power cables ran along the catwalks and down behind the east wall to a portable generator positioned behind a section of intact concrete wall where its hum would be absorbed by the sound of the river and the rain. The cables converged at a single junction box, which connected to a wireless kill box switch that fit in one hand. Sloan would hold it on the catwalk. The nomads took their positions with the unhurried precision of people who had learned that the quality of the waiting determined the quality of the action. Reyes climbed to a steel beam in the northeast corner and lay flat invisible in the darkness, sighting down the length of the warehouse floor. Cutler moved behind the hydraulic log deck near the loading bay. Two others took positions behind the massive bandsaw housings. Two more flanked the loading bay entrance from outside, hidden in the tree line. Each man carried a shotgun loaded with beanbag rounds per standing order. Each man also carried a sidearm on his hip loaded with hollow points in case non-lethal stopped being an option. Cole stood in the center of the warehouse floor. He had a single work lamp behind him aimed low, casting his shadow up the far wall in a long, dark column. He wore his cut, his boots were planted, his arms were crossed. He looked like something that had been placed there on purpose by someone who understood the specific visceral effect of a solitary figure in a large, dark space. 10 feet behind him, Doyle sat zip-tied to a wooden chair, his face a topographic map of the last 12 hours, the bruising from his capture laid over the older bruising from the diner. Before Sloan had climbed to the catwalk, she had visited Doyle in the hospital basement. He was 22, narrow-faced, with the slightly unfocused look of someone who had not slept and was not handling it well. He wore his prospect cut-the vest without full patches, the mark of someone still earning his place. He looked up when Sloan approached. Something moved across his face. Guilt, maybe, or the anticipation of guilt. He sat in a folding chair. His dead eyes had come back to life alive now, with a watchful, calculating quality. The eyes of a man who had accepted his situation and was spending every available moment searching for the angle that was not yet visible. "Here's what's going to happen," Sloan said. "You're going to call Nolan Voss. You're going to tell him that you have me and you have the bag. You're going to tell him the biker situation is under control, but the highways are being watched, so he needs to come to you. You're going to give him the address of the old mill off Forest Road 7, and you're going to sound convincing. And if I don't, then I hand the flash drive to the FBI tonight. Your name is on it, Doyle. 6 payments totaling $80,000. You're not just a hired hand, you're a co-conspirator. Without Voss here to cut a deal, the full weight falls on you. 25 to life federal." Doyle stared at her. The calculation behind his eyes was almost visible. "If I do this," Doyle said slowly, "what happens to me? You go to jail, but you go as a cooperating witness, not a primary defendant. The difference is 15 years. Doyle was quiet for a long time. Long enough that the sound of the building filtered through the walls, the distant hum of the elevator footsteps on the floor above. "Voss will know I talked," Doyle said finally. "The moment this goes federal, he'll know. And Voss has people in federal facilities. He'll also have a 47-count indictment in every resource the Justice Department can bring to bear," Sloan said. "Which is why the deal you're making tonight includes protective custody and relocation. That's not my offer to make, but it's the offer that exists, and it goes away the moment those FBI vehicles hit Forest Road 7. She looked at him. "You have about 6 hours to decide whether you want to be the person who helped build the case or the person who got left behind with it." A silence stretched. "You've done this before," Doyle said. "Not an accusation, just an observation." "No," Sloan said, "but I paid attention to the people who have." Doyle made the call. It lasted 90 seconds. His voice was steady, almost professional. He told Voss that the girl was secured, that the bag was intact, that the biker situation had been handled through the local police, and that the mill off Forest Road 7 was the safest extraction point. "Midnight," Voss agreed. His voice on the speaker, thin and impatient, a voice of a man who was used to problems being solved before they reached his desk. He would be there with his team. He wanted the drive. He wanted confirmation that every loose end was tied. Sloan climbed the iron ladder to the catwalk at 11:45. The rungs were cold and slick with rain. Her hands were numb by the time she reached the top. She moved along the catwalk to her position directly above the center of the warehouse floor, behind the railing with a clear sight line to every corner of the space below. She crouched behind the railing and looked down at her father. He was very still. He had always been very still when things were about to happen, as if danger burned away everything that was not essential and left only the core of him, which was something like bedrock. She had spent a long time running from what he was. She was starting to understand that what he was and what she was were not as different as she had needed to believe. The kill switch was in her left hand. Her phone was in her right. She looked down at her father standing alone in the dark and felt a fear so complete and specific that it had a taste. If this went wrong, if Voss's team was better or more numerous, then the intelligence suggested her father would be the first target. She pushed the fear down. She locked it away. There would be time for fear later. Right now, there was only the plan. At 12:03, Crane's voice came through the small radio clipped to her jacket collar. Low and distorted. Two vehicles on the access road. Lights off, moving slow, using the tree line. Sloan pressed transmit. How many? Can't confirm yet. Stand by. A pause, then Crane's voice again tighter. Two Escalades. Black. I can see the window profile from here, reinforced glass. Laminated, not standard. These aren't street vehicles, Sloan. Her stomach dropped an inch. Armored SUVs. Voss had not sent a retrieval team. He had sent an extraction force. Hold positions, she said. Nobody moves until I say. The two Escalades rolled through the loading bay entrance with the slow, deliberate weight of vehicles that understood they did not need to hurry. Their tires crunched on the broken concrete. The parking lights cast a faint amber glow across the floor without illuminating anything useful. They moved like two dark thoughts entering a dark room, purposeful and unhurried and very sure of themselves. They stopped in a V formation 20 yards from where Cole stood. Engines off. The silence that followed was the silence of people inside vehicles assessing a situation before they commit to it. Then the doors opened. 6 men stepped out. Not 4. 6. They moved with the fluid, overlapping efficiency of a well-trained team, spreading instantly into a covering formation, checking corners and overhead and shadow with the practiced economy of people who had cleared rooms in places that mattered. Tactical vests over dark clothing. Suppressed carbines held at the low ready. Night vision monoculars mounted on their helmets, lenses up but ready to drop. Private military contractors. The real kind. Men who had learned their trade in places where the learning was immediate and the consequences of getting it wrong were permanent. Sloan counted positions. Angles. She recalculated her coverage. She had planned for 4. She had hoped for 5. 6 was a different problem. Then the passenger door of the lead Escalade opened, and Nolan Voss stepped out. He was a disappointing figure for a man who had caused so much destruction. Small and slight in a charcoal wool overcoat that probably cost more than Ruth Holt made in 6 months. Wire-rimmed glasses. Thin hands that moved with the fastidious precision of someone accustomed to handling fine things and having other people handle the coarse ones. He carried a black umbrella, which he opened immediately against the rain, with the automatic gesture of a man who had never in his adult life allowed himself to be rained on, if it could be helped. He scanned the warehouse. He saw Doyle slumped and bound in the chair. He saw Cole standing alone in the center of the floor. He did not see the girl on the catwalk. He did not see the nomads in the shadows. He did not see the 6 lamps aimed down at the space where he was standing. He saw exactly what Sloan had designed for him to see. "You're not Doyle," Voss said. His voice carried easily in the empty warehouse, thin and precise, faintly impatient. The voice of a man for whom other people's inefficiency was a personal affront. "No," Cole said. "I'm the father." Voss looked at Cole with the expression of a man encountering an unexpected item on his schedule. Mild irritation. The barest flicker of reassessment. "The biker," Voss said. He almost sighed. "I'd hoped to avoid this. It's all so—" He gestured vaguely with his free hand. "Theatrical." He turned to his team. The gesture he made was the gesture of a man ordering the check, small, loose-wristed, entirely casual. "Kill him," Voss said. "Find the girl. Find the drive. Burn the building. I have a flight at 4. 6 carbines came up in unison. 6 red laser sights painted Cole's chest. The moment stretched. Sloan exhaled. She threw the switch. 84,000 lumens detonated in the warehouse like a second sun. 6 lamps blazing simultaneously, all aimed downward at the center of the floor, turning the dark cathedral of rust and abandonment into a blinding white void. The effect was not gradual. It was instantaneous. A wall of light that hit the 6 mercenaries with the physical force of something they had not anticipated and could not immediately process. These were professionals. They were trained for most things. They had not been trained for this specific thing, at this specific intensity from this specific angle after spending 40 minutes in near total darkness, while their eyes had been open at maximum dilation. Two of them stumbled backward, hands flying to their faces. One dropped to a knee, his aim breaking completely. The night vision monoculars still mounted on their helmets, lenses up, caught the reflected light and multiplied it, turning instruments of advantage into instruments of additional involuntary blinding. A half second, maybe less. The nomads moved. They came from the positions Sloan had placed them in, from behind the machinery, from the shadows along the walls, from the angles the mercenaries had not been able to check, because Sloan had placed the flood lamps to create specific blind spots in specific places. They came fast, and they came coordinated, and they came before the mercenaries had recovered. Reyes came off the beam. Cutler came from behind the log deck. Two more from the peon domain saw housings. All four with shotguns leveled closing distance. The first beanbag round hit the nearest mercenary in the chest. 200 grams of lead shot in a fabric pouch moving at 300 feet per second carries more kinetic energy than most people have experienced outside a car accident. The man went down as if the floor had come up to meet him, his carbine spinning away the air, exiting his lungs in a sound that was not quite a word. The second mercenary went the same way, hit from his left by Cutler, the impact spinning him sideways before his legs gave. Two more went down in the first 4 seconds. But the remaining two were faster than the math had suggested. These were men who had been fired upon in worse conditions than this and had learned to reduce everything to the immediate mechanical problem, cover angle target response, and execute without the interference of fear. They dropped behind the armored escalades and began returning fire within 6 seconds of the lights coming on. Disciplined return fire, controlled aim directed at muzzle flashes. The suppressed carbines made their abbreviated business-like sounds. Rounds punched into the conveyor housing where Reyes had repositioned. Sparks flew. A flood lamp near the loading bay took a round and burst with a sound like a light bulb magnified, and a pocket of shadow opened near the right side escalade. Sloan pressed herself flat against the catwalk grating. The metal was cold and wet beneath her palms. She could feel the vibration of each shot through the steel framework. The fear was present and physical and real, but it was not in charge. She was in charge. She looked down at the fight with the eye of someone who could see the geometry of the whole space, the angles and positions and gaps. The two mercenaries behind the escalades were using the vehicles as cover, and it was working. The nomads could not advance on them without crossing 10 feet of open floor with no intermediate cover. But they could not see the catwalk. Sloan moved. She stayed low below the railing line, moving on hands and knees along the wet grating. Each placement, deliberate, each movement controlled the cold rain, making the metal treacherous beneath her. She reached the lamp nearest the right side escalade. It was aimed at the center of the floor, its beam falling uselessly on empty concrete. She grabbed the housing. The metal was hot. She gripped through the heat and twisted the clamp. The beam swung. It swept across the warehouse wall like a searchlight, turning past the rusted machinery, past the concrete pillar, and then it found them. The two mercenaries crouched behind the escalade, their backs to the catwalk, their faces suddenly lit from an angle they had not accounted for. They flinched. One arm went up instinctively against the light, a half-second opening. Crane came around the pillar. He moved with the contained, efficient violence of a man who understood that violence was a tool, and tools were most effective when applied with precision. He hit the first mercenary with a forearm strike that redirected the carbine upward, stepped inside, and put the man into the escalade's rear panel with enough force to leave a visible dent in the armored door. The mercenary's head cracked against the metal. He went down and stayed down. The second mercenary swung toward Crane. His carbine came up. Briggs arrived from the left side. When a man who weighs 300 pounds closes 15 feet at full acceleration and makes contact with another man, the physics are not subtle. The mercenary left his feet. He traveled approximately 4 feet horizontally and came down on his back on the concrete with a sound that ended the conversation about whether he was going to keep fighting. Silence descended on the warehouse. The silence that follows a storm, not peaceful but exhausted. The specific quiet of a space that has just been through something and is now processing it. The floor was a wreck. Spent beanbag casings, shattered flood lamp glass, dented machinery, the two escalades bearing new scars. 6 mercenaries on the ground, restrained breathing, none of them going anywhere. Cole was bleeding. The wound was at the top of his left shoulder, a graze she could tell from the way he was still moving, but real the leather of his cut dark and wet from the shoulder seam down to the elbow. He had gone for one of the mercenaries as they came around the escalade and taken a round in the doing of it. He was standing. He was upright. He was walking toward Nolan Voss. Voss had not run. He had not fought. He had stood beside his escalade through the entire 90 seconds of it, with his umbrella clutched in both hands, the umbrella that a stray round had shredded sometime in the middle, its fabric hanging in wet strips from the wire frame, and watched his private army be systematically dismantled with the paralyzed incomprehension of a man who had spent his entire adult life ensuring that he was never in the same room when this kind of thing happened. His wire-rimmed glasses sat slightly crooked on his face. His charcoal overcoat was spattered with rainwater and concrete dust. His thin hands were shaking. He looked like what he was, a man whose entire world had just been rearranged without his permission by people he had grossly miscalculated. Cole grabbed him by the collar of his expensive coat and hauled him forward and through the loading bay without slowing down the smaller man's feet barely finding the floor. Out into the rain, out onto the bluff. The river was loud in the dark. 4 days of rain had brought it up well above its fall level, and in the night it was a sound more than a sight, a constant heavy roar from 80 feet below, the sound of water, with the patience to go wherever it needed to go and the force to take everything with it when it did. Cole walked Voss to the edge of the bluff and stopped. The ground ended 12 inches in front of Voss's polished shoes. Beyond the edge, the darkness dropped away into the sound of the river. In the faint ambient light, the water below was a moving darkness, fast and cold, and without any particular interest in what fell into it. Voss looked down. The sound he made was not a word. Crane materialized at Cole's left shoulder. He looked at the river. He looked at Voss. He looked at Cole. "Current's running hard tonight," Crane said, almost gently. "Water's high. Nobody finds anything in that for weeks. Maybe not at all." Cole stood at the edge of the bluff with his bleeding shoulder and his fist in Voss's collar and the rain running down his face and into his beard, and he looked at the man who had sat in a comfortable office and given the order to disappear his daughter, who had said the words "kill her" with the same casual authority with which he might tell someone to cancel a meeting, who had sent the knife that had gone into Jesse Holt's side. He thought about the river. He thought about how easy it was from here. He thought about everything that lived downstream of easy. He heard the footsteps behind him. Light. Quick. Sure. He knew them. Sloane came off the loading bay stairs and walked out onto the bluff in the rain. She was soaked, her short hair plastered flat, her jacket dark with water, her face pale in the way of someone who has been holding something very tightly for a very long time and is about to set it down. She had a cut on her right palm from the flood lamp housing. The blood had been washed thin by the rain running in a pink line between her fingers. She walked to her father's side. She looked at Voss, crumpled and shaking, at the edge of the drop, his expensive coat ruined, his glasses gone somewhere in the mud, his face a study in the bottomless terror of a man who has run out of transactions. She looked at her father. "Daddy," she said. He did not look at her. His jaw was set. The muscles in his forearm were rigid, his fist still bunched in Voss's collar, his eyes on the river below. "Daddy, look at me." He turned his head. The rain ran between them. The river roared below. The wind moved through the pines on the ridge above and carried the smell of pine sap and cold stone and the cleanness of Montana at night. "There is a boy in that hospital," Sloane said. Her voice was steady. It had cost her something to make it steady, and she paid that cost willingly because the words required it. "He is 17 years old. He had never been in a fight before tonight. He had no weapon. He had no plan. He had no backup and no idea what he was walking into. He just saw someone in trouble and stood up. With a dish rag." She paused. "That is the bravest thing I have ever seen in my life. And I have seen men do things that required real courage." Cole was listening. She could tell by the quality of the stillness he was present and he was hearing her. "If you put this man in that river," Sloane said, "you are telling the world that what Jesse did means nothing, that the only answer to violence is more violence, that the biggest fist always wins and the law is just what you call it when the fist isn't big enough." She took a step closer. You are proving every person who has ever called you a criminal right. Every prosecutor, every reporter, every person who said the Iron Saints are just men who use a code as an excuse. Another step. And you are proving Jesse wrong. You are standing over the body of the man who hurt him and demonstrating that the thing Jesse believed in, that standing up is enough, that doing the right thing matters, was a lie. The silence between them had a temperature and a texture. Cole's breathing was controlled and deliberate and very slow. He ordered them to kill you, Cole said. His voice was raw in a way she had never heard it, stripped of the granite and the authority and all the careful construction of 30 years. And what was underneath was not weakness. It was the voice of a man who had built an empire partly to ensure that the people he loved were never at the mercy of other people's decisions, and had discovered tonight that the empire had not been enough. I know, Sloan said. He said it like you were nothing, like my daughter was a line item. I know, she said again, and that is why I'm asking you not to. Because what I want is for him to stand in a federal courtroom and say those words out loud on the record in front of a judge, where it cannot be buried and it cannot be paid away. Where it is permanent, where it is real. She reached out and put her hand over his fist, over the bunched fabric of Voss's coat, over the knuckles that she had watched throw punches and fix engines and hold her when she was small enough that his hand covered both of hers completely. I just got you back, Daddy. I just started seeing the man I used to believe you were. Don't take that away from me. The sound the river made was enormous and patient and old. Cole looked at his daughter. He looked at Voss. He looked at the water below. He opened his hand. Voss collapsed. He hit the wet ground on his knees and stayed there folded over, gasping, his fingers clutching the mud and grass at the edge of the bluff. He was weeping, not the performance of weeping, but the actual thing, silent and shaking, the physical expression of a man who has been to the edge of something and been pulled back and does not yet know how to exist in the space after. Cole stepped back from the edge. He turned away from the river. He looked at Sloan, and for a moment in the rain, with the blood dark on his jacket and the exhaustion of the longest night of his life, in the lines of his face, he looked like what he was beneath all the rest of it. A father who had driven through the dark for 12 hours, terrified that his daughter was gone, and had arrived to find her not just alive, but standing on a bluff in the rain making the right call. He put his hand on the back of her head briefly, then he dropped his hand. Call them, he said. His voice was quiet and drained, the voice of something that has been running at full intensity for hours and has finally found the place where it can stop. Give them everything. Sloan made the call at 12:51 in the morning. This is Sloan Mercer, she said when the duty agent answered. I have information regarding a federal money laundering operation run by a man named Nolan Voss. I have a flash drive containing 4 years of documented bribe payments to law enforcement officers, state officials, and federal agents across 3 states. I have financial routing records for an offshore laundering network totaling in excess of $300 million. I have video of Nolan Voss personally ordering the murder of a minor. She paused. I also have Nolan Voss himself, along with 6 private military contractors, restrained at the old Harlan Mill off Forest Road 7 near Harlan's Crossing, Montana. I would suggest sending people quickly. She answered 4 questions. She provided GPS coordinates. She confirmed the condition of the detainees. She gave her own name, age, and current location. Then she said one more thing. Detective Walter Pruitt of the Harlan's Crossing County Sheriff's Department has been receiving payments from the Voss organization for 4 years. His name and account details are on the drive. Any information passed through his office should be considered compromised. She ended the call. She reached into her jacket pocket and produced the flash drive. She reached into Crane's jacket pocket and removed a strip of medical tape. She walked to where Voss was being helped to his feet by Briggs. She pressed the flash drive against his forehead and taped it there, flat, centered, inescapable. She stepped back and looked at it. Poetic, Crane said. I thought so, Sloan said. The nomads were already moving, dismantling the generator, removing the Iron Saints equipment from the premises. Within 20 minutes, the mill contained only what the FBI would need to find 6 mercenaries on the floor, or 1 man in an expensive coat with a flash drive taped to his head, and a battered Doyle who had made the best deal available to him and would spend the next several years making good on it in a federal witness room. The Iron Saints were gone before the first set of headlights appeared on Forest Road 7. The drive back to the hospital was silent. Sloane sat against the van wall with her knees drawn up, her head leaning back against the cold metal. The adrenaline was leaving her body the way water leaves a cracked vessel, steadily without drama, taking something with it that she knew she would not recover until she had slept for a very long time. Cole sat across from her, his left arm in a field dressing that Crane had applied with practiced efficiency. The wound would need stitches. He had refused to discuss it until the job was finished. The job was finished. They rode for a while in the dark without speaking. Then Cole said, "I was going to drop him." His voice was not confessional. It was just a statement of fact offered without decoration. "I know," Sloane said. "If you hadn't been there, I was there." He was quiet for a moment. "Your mother used to do that," Cole said. "Stand in front of me when I was about to do something I couldn't take back. Put herself between me and the thing." He stopped. The van moved through the dark. The pines on either side of the road were black walls against the lesser black of the skyline. She was the only person who ever could. Sloane looked at her father. She had spent 3 weeks running from what he represented. She had spent one night inside the thing. He was the structure of loyalty and consequence and code that he had built his life around, and she had bent it towards something different than it had always been bent toward. Not broken it, bent it. "She sounds like she was formidable," Sloane said. Cole looked at her. Something moved in his face, old and careful and enormous. "She was," he said, "she was the most formidable person I ever knew." He paused. "Until recently." They rode the rest of the way in silence. Father and daughter, the mountain and the storm, connected by blood and by the choice to be better than what blood alone required. Jesse Holt opened his eyes on a Friday morning. The ceiling first. White acoustic tile lit by a fluorescent panel that cast the specific flat light of rooms designed for recovery rather than living. The beeping second steady rhythmic somewhere to his left. The pain third, a deep hot line of fire running along his left side from the bottom of his ribs to his hip, pulsing with each heartbeat, like something with its own agenda, reminding him thoroughly and specifically of everything that had happened to put it there. He tried to move. His body delivered its opinion clearly and at volume. "Easy," said a voice. Soft, close, familiar in a way he could not immediately account for. "Don't try to move. You have 40-something stitches and a missing spleen. The doctor says you're supposed to lie still for at least another week." He blinked. He turned his head. She was sitting on the window ledge, one knee pulled to her chest, the early morning light coming in behind her and catching in her short dark hair. She was wearing a gray hoodie, soft and worn. Her hands were folded around her knee. Her eyes, that particular blue he had cataloged at some point between the bell above the diner door and the moment when everything had gotten very fast and very loud, were fixed on him with an intensity that made the room feel like a smaller space. "You're okay," Jesse said. It was the first complete thought his mind produced. Not a question. "Yes," Sloane said. She smiled. It was full and unguarded in a way that changed the geometry of her face, the careful composure relaxing into something that must have been there all along underneath. "Because of you." He thought about this. "Did I win?" he said. His voice came out as a dry rasp that hurt to produce, but the corner of his mouth moved. Sloane let out a breath that was somewhere between a laugh and something else, a sound with more history in it than laughter usually carries. "You won," she said. "You held the line. The rest of it got handled." She looked at him. "It's over, Jesse. The men who did this, they're in federal custody. All of them." "Good," Jesse said. He let his eyes drift closed for a moment, not unconsciousness, just the exhaustion of someone who has been holding something very heavy for a very long time and has just been told they can set it down. "That's good." The door opened, and Ruth Holt came in. She had not slept in 4 days. She had barely eaten. She had worn a path in the linoleum between the waiting room and the ICU doors that the night nurses had begun to think of as Ruth's path, a specific groove in the routine of the ward, as reliable as shift change. She saw her son's eyes open. She saw him look at her. She made a sound that was not a word. It was not designed to be a word. It was the sound a person makes when the thing they have been most afraid of losing is suddenly irrevocably still there. She crossed the room and gathered him in her arms as carefully as a person handles something they understand to be both precious and fragile. pressing her face into the curve of his neck and shaking with the sobs she had been holding back through 4 days of terror and prayer and the grinding endurance of a woman who had learned long ago that she did not have the option of coming apart. "My boy," she said, "my stubborn, wonderful, impossible boy." Jesse held his mother with his free arm and winced at the pressure on his side and did not complain about it. "Hey, Mom," he said. Cole arrived 20 minutes later. He was not wearing his cut. He wore a dark t-shirt and jeans, his left arm in a proper sling, now the wound dressed in clean white bandaging. He carried his helmet in his right hand and a small paper bag in the other. He did not announce himself. He did not need to. Ruth saw him first and went very still, the way people go still when something large and deliberate enters their space. Jesse saw him a moment later and understood without being told exactly who this was. Cole walked to the bedside. He looked down at Jesse, at the bandaging, the tubes, the monitors, the fragility of a 17-year-old boy in a hospital bed who had gone looking for nothing more than the end of a Tuesday night shift and had found something else entirely. Cole extended his hand. Jesse took it. Cole's hand was enormous, calloused ink, covered the hand of someone who had spent decades gripping handlebars and making hard decisions. He held Jesse's hand with a gentleness that seemed structurally at odds with the rest of him, as if it were a mode he had to shift into deliberately and had learned over a long time to access. "You saved my world, son," Cole said. His voice was low. There was something in it that had not been there before Tuesday night, a quality of having been taken apart and reassembled, not quite in the original configuration, some structural change that you could not point to specifically, but that was present in the whole. "There aren't words for that. There isn't enough money in the world for that. You gave me back my daughter." Jesse looked at him. He thought about the moment in the diner, the moment before the vault over the counter, the moment of decision which had not felt like a decision at all. It had felt like the absence of a choice, like there was only one thing a person could do and he had done it. "I just couldn't let them take her," Jesse said. "That didn't seem right." "No," Cole said. "It wasn't right, and most men would have stayed behind the counter." He paused. "You didn't." He released Jesse's hand. He reached into his jacket pocket and produced a set of car keys which he placed on the bedside table with the deliberateness of someone completing a specific act that means something. "My people went by your house," Cole said. "We saw the Taurus in the garage." Jesse went very still. The transmission was shot. Head gasket was blown. "We pulled the whole drivetrain." Cole looked at him steadily. "It runs. Brand new engine, new transmission, new paint, the same dark blue it was. We fixed the AC. It runs better than the day it left the factory." Jesse stared at the keys. He thought about 9 years of Saturday mornings in the garage, the parts he had ordered with dishwasher money, the videos he had watched on the library computer, the way the car sat in the garage with its hood up like a question he had never quite been able to answer, the way he had believed, without ever quite articulating it, that if he could fix the car his father had left behind, he would have fixed something that the leaving had broken. His throat was very tight. Cole reached into his other pocket. He produced a second set of keys. The fob was silver, the distinctive shield of Harley-Davidson. He set it in Jesse's open palm. "A 2024 Iron A 83 Sportster," Cole said. "Matte black, custom exhaust, insurance and registration handled. It's in your garage next to the Taurus." A pause. "For when you're ready." Jesse looked at the key in his hand. He looked at Cole. He looked at Sloane, who was watching from the windowsill with her knee pulled up and her eyes bright with something that was not quite tears and not quite not. "I can't accept this," Jesse said. "You're not accepting a gift," Cole said. "You're accepting a debt being paid." He looked at Jesse with the gravity of a man who means exactly what he says and considers the precision of language a matter of honor. "There's also a trust fund, full scholarship, university, trade school, wherever you want to go, whatever you want to study. Room, board, books, everything. The Iron Saints are carrying it." Ruth Holt pressed both hands over her mouth. The sound she made was the sound of 4 days of terror transforming into something else entirely. "Mr. Mercer," she said when she could speak, "you don't have to pay." "Yes, I do," Cole said. He looked at her with the same directness he had given her when he knelt on the linoleum 4 days ago. "He bled for my family. My family carries his." That is the only code I've ever believed in. He looked at Jesse one more time, the look of a commanding officer acknowledging a soldier who has proved himself somewhere that mattered. You're family now, Jesse. You've got brothers in every state. You ever need anything, you make one call. He put his helmet under his arm. He walked to the door. He paused in the frame and looked back at Sloan. Something passed between them, the wordless communication of two people who have been through something together that has changed the map of who they are to each other. A question asked and answered in the space between one breath and the next. Then he walked out. His boots were heavy on the linoleum, and then they were not, and then the hallway was quiet. Sloan sat with Jessie after Ruth had gone to the hallway to call her sister, to cry happy tears into a phone, her voice carrying through the closed door in fragments of joy that had waited too long to be expressed and were making up for it now. The room was quiet except for the monitor and the distant growing sound from the parking lot below the first engines turning over the low rumble that comes before the roar. They're leaving, Jesse said. Yeah, he was looking at the window. Yeah, Sloan said, back to their lives. And you, the question was simple. It hung in the air between them like a thing that had been waiting to be asked since the moment she had walked into the diner with the wrong bag over her shoulder, and the careful scanning eyes, and something about her had made him say rough night instead of nothing. Sloan looked at the window. The parking lot below was a river of motion, now men mounting up engines, finding their voices, the formation beginning to assemble itself with the iron discipline of a unit that knew how to leave a place as deliberately as it had arrived. She could see her father's Road King at the head of the column, black and heavy, the chrome and catching the morning light like a cold fire. She could go. She had always known it. One word, and she could walk out of this hospital and into the world she had been born into, and it would close around her like water, seamless, familiar, the pull of belonging, pulling her back into the shape of the person she had been. She thought about that person. She thought about the girl who had sat on a Greyhound bus 3 weeks ago with $400 and a carefully controlled expression and the conviction that disappearing is the same as being free. She thought about the moment on the bluff in the rain with the river roaring below and her father's fist in Nolan Voss's collar when she had understood something she had not understood before, that courage was not the absence of belonging. It was the refusal to let belonging make your decisions for you. I'm not going with them, she said. Jesse looked at her. I'm going to stay here for a while, Sloan said. Help your mom while you recover. Find a place to land. She paused. Finish my diploma. Apply to college. For what? Law. The word came out of her with a solidity that surprised even her, the weight of a decision that has been arriving for a long time and has finally completed its journey. I've watched things get solved with money and fists and the threat of what happens to people who don't cooperate my whole life, she said. I want to learn how to solve them differently. With evidence. With arguments. In rooms where the record is permanent and the outcome is public and the truth has to be able to survive scrutiny. She looked at him. You did something Tuesday night that I don't think you understand yet. You didn't hit anyone harder than they hit you. You didn't outmuscle anyone. You just stood in the way and refused to move and said no, and that was enough to change everything. She looked at him steadily. I want that to be my weapon. I want to spend the rest of my life learning to be that kind of powerful. Jesse was quiet for a moment. Something in his expression was the early shape of a smile working its way toward his face despite the morphine and the 40 stitches and the missing spleen. Law school, he said. That's going to rearrange your dad's whole sense of the universe. Sloan laughed. It surprised her. It arrived before she could prepare for it, sudden and real, the laugh of someone who has remembered they are capable of it. The laughter of a girl who has been holding herself together under extreme pressure for 4 days and has found in a hospital room on a Friday morning the first genuinely uncomplicated moment. He'll adapt, she said. He seems like he can handle things, Jesse said. He can handle most things, Sloan said. He's going to have a harder time with this one, but he'll get there. She looked at him. What about you engineering the scholarship you've had about 10 minutes to think about it? Jesse looked at the ceiling. He looked at the keys on the bedside table, both sets, the Taurus and the Harley, side by side on the pressboard surface. He thought about the garage in autumn, the hood up, the grease on his hands, the satisfaction of making something run that had been broken. Automotive engineering, maybe, he said, or mechanical. Something that builds things. Something that fixes things. A pause. Something that takes a broken thing and makes it better than it was. That sounds right, Sloan said. A knock at the door. Sloan opened it. Crane stood in the hallway holding a vest. Not a full member's cut, no patches, no rockers, nothing that named him or claimed him. Just a piece of quality leather, clean and black and new. On the left breast, a single patch had been stitched in white thread against the black leather, protected by the Iron Saints. Crane held it out to Sloan without speaking. She took it. She brought it back to the bed and held it up so Jesse could see. She watched his face, then she draped it over the back of the chair beside his bed. "My father left that for you," she said. "Wear that anywhere in this country and nobody touches you." Crane had already gone. The sound began at 6:04. A low tremor first felt before it was heard coming up through the floor of the building through the chair where Sloan sat through the window glass in the frame. Then the sound itself, engines, dozens, then hundreds, finding their voices one by one, and then all together a sound that was not simply loud but textured, layered the thunder of American engines in number, a sound that had its own weather. Sloan went to the window. Below the formation was complete. 200 machines in 3 abreast columns, stretching from the hospital parking lot out through the main entrance and down Elm Street as far as she could see. Running lights blazing in the early morning gray. Chrome gleaming with the cold clarity of a Montana October dawn. The riders sitting straight, not rigid but upright, with the posture of people who have covered enough miles to have made peace with both the road and themselves. At the head of the column, Cole Mercer's Road King idled with a deep, unmistakable authority. He was looking up. He had found the window. He had found her, she could tell by the quality of the stillness, the way he had stopped moving, and the way he stopped moving when he had located something he had been looking for. She pressed her hand against the glass. The vibration came through it, through the pane and the frame and the old brick of the hospital wall into her palm and up through her arms, settling in her chest somewhere near the center, like a frequency her body already knew. Cole raised his hand, not a wave, not a gesture of farewell. An acknowledgement, the minimal, precise gesture of a man who uses exactly as much as he means, and no more, raised in the direction of his daughter, saying the thing that men like him say with motion, because they cannot quite manage it with words. "I see you, I know you, I am proud of you." Then he dropped his hand, engaged the clutch, and the column moved. It moved with the coordinated precision of something that had been doing this for a long time and had no reason to do it any other way. Down Elm Street, past the hospital, past the Lutheran church, whose bells were beginning their 6 o'clock sequence, past the hardware store and the Sawmill Tavern and the darkened windows of Holt's Diner still closed behind its yellow police tape, past the population sign at the edge of town, and then onto Highway 93, the engines opening up as the formation found the road, and the road gave them what roads give direction and distance, and the promise that the horizon keeps moving. The sound built. It rose to its full enormous pitch, the kind of sound that does not ask permission and does not apologize for taking up space. Then it began to fade, slowly. The way thunder fades not all at once, but in layers, the loudest frequencies going first, and the lowest ones holding on the longest, like something reluctant to leave. Sloan kept her hand on the glass until she could no longer feel the vibration. She watched until the last running light disappeared over the ridge to the south. Then she turned around. Ruth Holt was back in her chair, the rosary in her hands, her face worn and luminous, with the radiance of someone who has been through the worst and has come out the other side still standing. Jesse was asleep, real sleep, the slow rhythmic breathing of a body that has stopped fighting and started healing. The vest on the back of the chair caught the window light, the white stitching bright against the black leather. Sloan picked up the mechanic's manual from the bedside table. She turned it over in her hands. She looked at the worn spine, the soft pages, the margin notes in a young man's handwriting. She sat down in the chair by the window. She opened it to page 1. She began to read. Outside Harlan's Crossing settled back into itself the steady, unhurried rhythm of a small town resuming its ordinary life, which it does the way small towns always do after extraordinary things have passed through carefully and with the particular gratitude of a place that understands what it has been given by returning to quiet. The October sun climbed above the Bitterroot Range and spilled its light into the valley, long and gold and clean. In room 214, a girl who had been running for 3 weeks sat still. She was not running from anything. She was not running toward anything. She was simply here in a plastic chair in a county hospital in a small town in Montana that was not on any map worth reading at the beginning of a life she had chosen for herself. She turned a page. She kept reading. The legend of Harlan's Crossing spread the way all true stories spread in diners and barbershops and around fires when the night is long. They told the story of the boy who stood between a girl and a knife with nothing but a dish rag and his own 2 feet. They told the story of the girl who called an army but led it with her conscience. They told the story of the father who knelt before a cleaning woman and chose the courtroom over the river. And they told the story of 200 engines shaking a mountain town awake and reminding it for one long and thunder-filled night what it sounds like when courage arrives in force. Jesse Holt made a full recovery. He graduated from high school and enrolled in mechanical engineering school on the Iron Saints Scholarship. He opened his own restoration shop in Missoula years later, specializing in classic American vehicles and vintage motorcycles. The matte black Iron 883 Sportster sat in the front window for years, polished and never for sale, a reminder he never needed to explain to anyone. Sloan Mercer finished high school in Harlan's Crossing. She graduated valedictorian. She went to college, then law school, and passed the bar on her first attempt. She never wore the leather again, but she kept a photograph of her father on her desk, taken from a distance on a highway somewhere in Nevada. The Road King, a black shape against a red sky next to a folded menu from a diner in Montana that still made the best fries she had ever eaten. Nolan Voss was indicted on 47 federal counts. 19 law enforcement officers, 2 judges, and a state senator were charged as co-conspirators. Walter Pruitt pleaded guilty to 12 counts of public corruption and was sentenced to 11 years in a federal penitentiary. He did not return to Harlan's Crossing. Derek Sallow surrendered his cut on a Wednesday morning and was on a bus east before noon. He did not contest it. He did not ask for anything. He had understood in a hospital cafeteria on a Tuesday night that the girl sitting across from him had given him something rarer than mercy. She had given him a way out that did not require anyone to die for it. He took it and did not look back. Some debts he had learned cannot be repaid. They can only be carried. Cole Mercer rode for many years after that night on the bluff. He never spoke publicly about what had happened there. But people who knew him said he was different after Harlan's Crossing, not softer exactly, just more deliberate, more careful about the difference between strength and force, more willing to ask rather than tell. He called his daughter every Sunday. She always picked up.